And we're continuing with the fourth chapter of The Whispering Mountain by Joan Aiken. Erebus has rescued Owen from where he was tied up, but he was kind of tied to a pole and is not able to walk very far, so she can't take him back to the caravan, but she's found Brother Ianto to take him in, and we'll continue from there. And when Owen, taking a faltering step, began to slip toward the ground, Brother Ianto, with arms thin and wiry as steel cables, picked him up bodily and carried him into a warm, steamy cave at the end of a short passage. There he was laid on a bed of moss and obliged to swallow a mug of hot water. It had a strong and disagreeable taste of rotten eggs, but went gratefully down his dusty and aching throat. "He will do," Brother Ianto said. "A long sleep, that is all he needs."
"I will be gone from you now, then," Erebus said, "and I will be bringing back some of my good broth and herb tea by and by, and I am grateful to you indeed, Brother Ianto."
"No matter for that, child. I have had a fine pot of ointment from you for my rheumatic old leg bones, that have made me lively as a young colt, and your worthy father have cut my beard with not a penny to pay, and loosed a noble gale of poetry on me while he did it. No thanks needed among such friends." Erebus left the cave, and the sound of her footsteps echoing in the rock passage was the last thing Owen heard before he sank into a heavy, dreamless sleep. When he woke up again, he lay gazing about him in bewilderment. The little cave was dim, lit only by two tapers that stood in front of a rude statue of St. Enodog, and misty from the steam of a little hot spring that ceaselessly bubbled and sank in one corner. Brother Ianto sat working away at something in another corner. Presently he took his work, whatever it was, outside into the daylight to have a look at it. Owen, roused a little more by the movement, now began to remember where he was and what had happened to him. Involuntarily he let out a groan of anguish. Brother Ianto came back quickly. Are you in pain with you, boy?" he said.
"The harp," Owen muttered. "They took the harp. I couldn't stop them, but that's not the worst."
He was unable to go on just then. At the thought of the letters he had been made to write, a great lump of despair and misery came up into his throat and nearly suffocated him. His grandfather would think. Everybody would think.
"Oh, what shall I do?" he muttered hopelessly.
"Humph," said Brother Ianto. "When did you last have to eat, boy?" Owen tried to remember. He had eaten a little with the thieves, Prigman putting morsels into his mouth. Was that 1 day ago or 2? How long had he been at the empty house? He shook his head. "As I thought," Brother Ianto said. "Weak from the lack of food, but in a good hour here comes someone to put that right. Split peas I have by here, but am thinking they would be a bit hard for you." Erebus came into the cave. Her hair and the red cloak she wore shone with raindrops. She carried a covered basket in one hand and a covered can in the other. "Herb tea first," she said, pulling a little flask from the basket, "then broth." Owen would have preferred the broth first. The herb tea tasted even nastier than the mineral water from the cave spring, but both Erebus and Brother Ianto assured him that it would do him good, and when it was drunk he did feel strong enough to sit up and swallow 2 mugfuls of delicious broth.
"And I brought you some piccoos, and a loaf of bread, and a loaf of baraberth for your supper, Brother Ianto," Erebus said, and taking them out and putting them on a ledge of rock. The spicy scent of plums and cloves and cinnamon filled the cave.
"Too good for me, they are," Brother Ianto objected, busy at his work, whatever it was. "Dried peas are enough."
"Oh, pooh, Erebus said. She surveyed Owen anxiously and asked him, "The sleep have done you good, is it?"
He nodded. He did feel better, almost well in body, but his mind was so sore and wretched that he hardly knew how to bear it.
"Right then," Erebus said. "If I don't have your story out of you this minute, I'm afraid my ears will grow tongues on them and be grumbling away at you like a pair of old ravens." So Owen told his story. "And then they left me in the cottage," he concluded. "Bilk tied me up the way you saw, and put a gag on me. I thought I was done for." "How did old Hawk come to find you?" Erebus demanded. "I heard him outside. At least I heard the whistling sound of a hawk's dive, and I thought there was just a chance, as you was staying in Nantagadow, that it might be Hawk. But how could you call him? Do you remember when I was traveling with you in the wagon, How I trained Hawk to come if I whistled the ash grove? No danger I'd forgot, Erebus said, laughing. When Dada made us walk 100 yards behind the wagon because he said that if he heard that tune one more time he would go wild mad and take the shovel to us. But Owenbach, you had that great gag stuffed in your mouth. How to make the old Hebog hear you. Oh, said Owen, rather embarrassed. I whistled through my nose. Through your nose, boy? What kind of a tale is that? Tell to the crows. True, though, Owen said, and produced a strange droning tune through his nose that might just be recognized as the ash grove. Hawk, who was perched nearby on a knob of rock, turned his head alertly and was across the cave in one flip of his wings to sit on Owen's shoulder. I learned it on the boat coming home from China. The bosun taught me, he said awkwardly. Well, that is useful, Brother Ianto said in his quiet way. Otherwise there would not have been too much chance for you, I am thinking. Just let me get my hands on that pair, Erebus muttered vengefully. Hard put to it their own wives will be to recognize them, and taking your grandpa's precious harp. Oh! Her hand flew to her mouth. She stared at Owen and Brother Ianto. What did you say their names were? Bilk, Owen said. Bilk and Prigman. That was it, then. Where are the wits in me? That was what those two men were stowing away so tidily, and each of the wretches meaning to rob the other. What are you talking about, girl? But there was more color in Owen's pale cheeks. Erebus told of her morning's watch, and the two men hiding their booty. Keeping an eye on the quarry all day I have been, she said, but no chance to go back and take a peep. Always someone about down below. Hurry back now, though, I must. Or maybe that one called Bilk may go and shift it again. I'll come with you, Owen said, struggling to his feet, wonderfully restored by the news. Those men are dangerous. If they caught you, gracious knows what they mightn't do. Really, you shouldn't go near at all. There's silly. Go I must, boy, if the place is to be found. Owen realized the truth of this. Let us hurry, then, he said. If I can only get the harp back to my grandfather, then the letters will not matter so much. Perhaps I can explain. He was nearly dragging Erebus from the cave. Wait, you, my young hotheads, Brother Ianto said. He rummaged in a crevice and produced another monk's robe. Put this on you, boy. It will fit you well enough. It was poor Brother Twins, who was so glad to get home to his native land that he died and went to heavenly rest the very next day. Put the cowl over your head, see, and if those two men should be roaming the town, they will not know you from Merlin the magician. He then put on a pair of spectacles, at which Owen gazed enviously, pulled his own cowl over his head, and added, Go with you I will. No harm to have another along, and eager I am indeed to see this harp of Tier 2. Outside, the rainy, misty afternoon was rapidly turning to evening. Whoop, shivered Brother Ianto. Homely it is to be back in this curiously damp climate. Doubled up like an old man I'd be with the rheumatics, if it were not for your wintergreen ointment, Erebus, my child. They set off. Erebus in the lead, Brother Ianto hobbling as fast as he could with a stick, Owen bringing up the rear. Even after the rest and hot food, he was still stiff from his long painful hours of captivity, and purblind without his glasses. However, he gritted his teeth and stumbled along, just managing to keep up. The thought of recovering the harp was a powerful spur. The fair, when they reached it, was in full activity. Stalls brightly lit offered everything from gingerbread men to the water of perpetual youth. Hawkers called their wares, children screamed and laughed and raced about on painted hobby horses, clog dancers stamped on wooden platforms, and the music of harps, flutes, dulcimers tinkled and lilted in the rainy air. But beyond the circumference of the fair, up in the back of the quarry, all was dark and silent. Light we need, Erebus muttered, and she slipped to her own caravan and returned with a horn lantern, which drew a small golden flickering shine on the wet brambles and oak leaves and ferns. Then she led the way, slow but sure, in among the bushes, following in reverse the course she had taken that morning. At last she whispered, This was the place. Marked it carefully, I did. By that old stump, like a mother hen with chickens. Up there, not 12 feet above, should be the hole where he laid the bundle. They moved carefully up the hillside, noting traces where Bilk had passed. Here a footprint in a tussock of moss, there a broken sapling. The slope they were climbing ended in a short vertical cliff, and soon, among the bushes at its base, they found the cave, a gaping black hole about the size of a chair set. "That's it! That must be it!" Erebus breathed. "Look, you can see the marks in the mold and leaves where he pushed the bundle into the hole."
Forgetting his weariness, Owen hurled himself up the hill to the opening and thrust his arms inside. He could feel nothing except earth and sand. Which had silted up to the floor. "I'll go in," he whispered. "Then you pass me the lantern and I'll look around." Ducking his head and compressing his shoulders, he crawled through the small opening, then reached back with an arm for the light. His two companions waited anxiously in the dark. Once inside the little cave, he found the ceiling was higher, and he was able to hold up the lantern and survey the whole place. His hopes, which had been feverishly high, came down with a sickening rush, for the harp was not there. A depression in the soft sand just inside the entrance on one side showed where something had been lain, but the marks also showed where it had been dragged out again. The blow was crushing, to have come so near where it had been hidden, and to miss it by so short a time.